Hi, this is the Incorrigible Luddite, and I'm here at Seattle Records in lovely Seattle, Washington, northern end of the U District, on a beautiful, wet March day. And I'm doing the top three records, in my opinion, that is subjectively speaking, 1982. And 1982 is actually my favorite year in the history of popular music, and it is because the three albums that I have at the top, again, this is subjective, but some honorable mentions that I want to mention from 1982. First and foremost, Prince 1999, the first of his four masterpieces. I love this record mainly because of the deep cuts, not because of the singles. Stuff like Automatic, which is a real synth funk masterpiece. I believe that's on side three. International Lovers, one of the greatest male vocal performances of all time. Lady Cab Driver, fantastic. And also Something in the Water Does Not Compute. Those are probably my four favorite tracks on that record, especially Automatic. Probably top five all-time Prince track for me. Also, The Cure, Pornography, released also in 1982 as an honorable mention. Some great tracks on that record. It's their most harrowing record. It's got A Strange Day, Siamese Twins, The Figurehead, Cold, fantastic record. Some others I want to mention as well. Peter Gabriel's self-titled fourth record called Security here in the U.S. Very forward-thinking record with Shock the Monkey. You've also got Duran Duran Rio. Psychedelic Furs, Forever Now, great record produced by Todd Rundgren with a big hit, Love My Way. Roxy Music Avalon, which is definitely like Sail into the Sunset, suave, sophistopop style of music. It's fantastic. It's got More Than This on there. And lastly, probably the most underrated Lou Reed record, The Blue Mask, which is actually probably my favorite Lou Reed record. But those are some honorable mentions from the year. And this is the top honorable mention. But the big three for me, and I'm going to rank them in order in my opinion. Number three is Kate Bush, The Dreaming. Simply put, this is probably the most eccentric record ever composed by a mainstream artist. It's a very experimental record. It's very theatrical, as you might expect with Kate Bush. It also qualifies as a progressive record. There's a lot of interesting time signature shifts on this particular record. Her vocals are great, as they always are. It's definitely her weirdest record, but it also flows the bestest in the album. She's got a later masterpiece, Hounds of Blood, but for me, this is the top Kate Bush record without any question. Some great tracks on here. There Goes a Tenor, Suspended in Gaffa. Just a lot of great stuff on here. Get Out of My House, which I think was inspired by The Shining. Just incredible tracks on this record. All the Love, another great track on here. So I can't recommend this one highly enough. Definitely flows together as an album piece. Side one, maybe slightly better than side two, but this is an album listen all the way. Probably one of my 20 favorite records of all time. I wanted to mention this one at number three. Number two is going to be Rush Signals. And I definitely think this is the most underrated Rush record ever. I'm also going to say this is one of my 20 favorite records of all time, without any question. This one, kind of like this one up here, 1999, has been with me since a very young age. Since the age of 13 or 14 when it came out. I've always connected to this record. I think it's stronger than its predecessor, Moving Pictures, which is also a masterpiece, but I never liked Limelight on that particular album at all. This album is pretty much perfect. Subdivisions opens it up. Probably my favorite Rush radio song as far as classic rock radio is concerned. Digital Man, fantastic track. You've also got Chemistry on here. It's great drumming all over this record. It's also Neil Peart's best songwriting, without any question, and it's a very big sounding record, very cinematic, very atmospheric. Again, almost a perfect record. The only complaint I could possibly find with it might be on the last two tracks on side two, Losing It and Countdown. Losing It, great lyrical song. Probably the only song on the record where I'm really not keen on Geddy's vocals on this particular song. And Countdown is a great musical track. Really not convinced on the lyrics from this particular track, but the first, all of side one is just absolutely perfect. The Weapon and New World Man on side two to open up, fantastic. I like the last two songs as well, Losing It and Countdown. Just a couple minor complaints there. But yeah, this is definitely my favorite Rush record and my second favorite record of 1982. Top 20 all-time record for sure. But number one, and I'm going to go on record and say, this is officially my favorite record of all time. And that is 1982's A Kiss in the Dream House by Siouxsie and the Banshees. Now, this is a fantastic record. This is the ultimate fantasy meets reality record that I've ever heard. Of the records I've showed here today, this is actually the one that I became familiarized with most recently. Well, over the course of the last 6 years, starting, I think I first heard this record in its entirety back in late 2016. Now, I was always familiar with the two singles from the Twice Upon a Time, the single CD collection, and those were Melt and Slow Dive. Slow Dive was always a particular favorite, but I hadn't heard the rest of the record. Now, when I heard this as an album whole, could not believe what I was hearing. Again, for me personally, this is the ultimate fantasy meets reality record. It hits the sweet spot where fantasy and reality meet. It's very much like an adult fairy tale. It's a very, very psychedelic record. Probably the most psychedelic record I've heard this side of 1967. It's also got avant-garde elements. It's got one great pop song in Slow Dive, which is, of course, in the Siouxsie and the Banshees tradition, a very imaginative pop song with a violin in it. And it's also quite the salacious record. Might be more dangerous than their more celebrated their more celebrated predecessor, Juju, which is also, of course, a masterpiece. But this is my favorite. And again, it's kind of the fairy tale element of this particular album, and the way the songs actually string together on this record is complete work of art. It's a very experimental record. Favorite tracks on this record, it's hard to say because every track on this record for me is literally a 10 out of 10. But if forced to pick, I'm going to throw 5 out there. Slow Dive, which I've known the longest, fantastic single, very imaginative, has very much kind of a dance flavor to it, but it's still a rock song, but a very an imaginative one. And again, in the Siouxsie and the Banshees vein. Painted Bird, it's probably my favorite track on the record. It's just fantastic guitar work on this track by the late, great John McGeoch. Great vocals from Siouxsie. You've also got Obsession, which is a very interesting track. Probably the darkest track on the record. Very interesting. It's almost proto-trip-hop. You can see how a band like Portishead would have been very influenced by this particular track. You can also hear the influence on the Smashing Pumpkins on this particular track. If you listen to something like Disarm and listen to this, I think you'll see where I'm coming from. But Obsession's just a fantastic track. Circle, which is kind of it's very hypnotic. It's a very repetitive track, and I think that was what they were designed, what this track was designed to do. It's quite hypnotic. It feels very stream of consciousness. The lyrics by Siouxsie on this track. It sounds like there's a recorder on the track, and it does sound like it might be being played backwards, but it's a phenomenal track. And lastly, I definitely want to mention Cascade as well, which is probably the most, well, it's not straightforward, but probably the closest thing to a straightforward rock track on the record. It's a great track written by Steve Severn. It's got a big subaquatic bass line, fantastic vocals from Siouxsie on this track, and all across the whole record. This album actually is where I think Siouxsie as a vocalist starts to become more theatrical. Its predecessor, Juju, probably a bit more on the hypnotic side, but now we're starting to move into more theatrical territory with this record. But again, the mix of styles on this record and how they all blend together cohesively. Also, you've got Cocoon, I failed to mention at the end of the record, or right before Slow Dive, second to last song on the record, actually infuses some jazz as well, and almost lounge. So, yeah, this is a stunning listen that really brings a lot of styles together, but at the end of the day, it's a very psychedelic record, and it's quite a salacious record that works together as one continuous flow. It's quite brilliant, and it is my favorite record of all time. 1982's A Kiss in the Dream House by Siouxsie and the Banshees. I also want to mention that not too long ago I did a review for Seattle Records on another Siouxsie and the Banshees record, which was 1986's Tinderbox, which I actually purchased here on the special 2021 maroon vinyl. If you'll be interested in watching that video, it is out there. But again, I want to thank Seattle Records for letting me come in today and do this presentation. I enjoyed doing it. And again, top 3 records of 1982. Kate Bush, The Dreaming. Number 3, Rush Signals, number 2. And number 1, my favorite record of all time, Siouxsie and the Banshees, A Kiss in the Dream House. Thanks for watching and have a great day.